we're here, and we're talking about colorism. And I wanted to ask you. Okay, so there was something a girl who turned out to be she's actually not black. She's whitish, Caribbean, and she's been pretending to be black, a red bone. And she came out with a song the other day called Yellow Bone, and she's like, he want a yellow bone, he want a yellow bone, he want a yellow bone. And people was like, yo, what the heck, you're not even black, like you're pretending to be black, and you're trying to like big up yellow bones and like make it seem like yellow bones is better than dark skin chicks and whatnot. So she got a lot of flack for that. Her name is Danny Lee. She dates this rapper, this dark skin guy, this rapper, big time rapper.
So she's essentially white, pretending to be a light-skinned black woman.
Yes.
Okay.
Both of her parents they look like full-blown Hispanics. They're like hot white Hispanics.
Okay.
You know which ones I'm talking about. Not the Afro-Caribbean ones with the curly hair. They the ones with the straight hair. The Latinos. They just are Latinos. And she's pretending to be a black woman. So, and when you grew up, you experienced some colorism back in the 60s. You grew up in the 50s and the 60s. What was it like experiencing colorism back then?
Well, I was born in 1950.
Right.
And my mother grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And she had inherited, like many black people, a very strong tradition of believing that the lighter you were, the more attractive you were, the more valuable you were. My father grew up here in the DMV area, Maryland. He was very, very, very dark. And my mother was very funny about colorism. She had 3 husbands. I never knew the first one. Her second one was biracial. A white mother, black father, and he passed for white periodically. Back in the day, black people who could pass for white would pass for white to get certain advantages, then they go back black again. And when she left...
So that was similar to what the girl Danny Lee that I was telling you about, the girl she's doing.
Right.
So it's
fluid.
But that's something that went away.
Yes.
What years
What happened was, it was felt that once the civil rights movement and everything, you didn't need to do that. But anyway, she said after she left her second husband...
Hold on, let me see this. Go. I just want to say, once the civil rights movement happened...
Black people were not passing for white so much. You had black families...
So it was that big of a jump in the quality of life from before civil rights to after civil rights.
Yes, I mean, you're talking about families where you would have light-skinned black people. If you wanted to go to a particular college, you couldn't if you were black. If you wanted to go to live in a certain neighborhood, you couldn't if you were black. If you wanted to go to a restaurant, you couldn't. If you wanted to get a loan, you could not if you were black. So for some black people, the decision to pass for white was strategic. It wasn't always about hating their blackness, hating black families. It was simply a strategic move to improve their lives. So my mother said to me, she said, well, when I was with Mr. Hall, I was a real light man. Now I wanted to see what it was like to be with a real black man. So I got with your father. Now,
so your mother's dark skinned.
My mother was about my complexion.
Okay.
About my complexion. But she had grown up, like at one point, the title of my book, Don't Play in the Sun, One Woman's Journey Through the Color Complex.
So now, when did you write this book?
Comes back in 2006.
Okay.
That comes from something my mother told me. And that was, don't play in the sun. You're going to have to get a light-skinned husband for the sake of your children. And she didn't tell me that because she wanted to hurt me. She simply knew that lighter skin equaled a kind of currency in the world that was like money. So she didn't say that to hurt me, but of course it did.
Right.
Now, ironically, my mother also told me when I was about 12 years old that one day I was going to write a book. So she both diminished me in some ways around my color, but she exalted me in terms of my talent. And in my family, my adopted sister
Jean.
Jean was very light.
Now tell us the story about Jean. So your parents go down south. This is before you're born, right?
What happened was that my mother adopted Jean from a family in Richmond, Virginia.
So they go down. She goes down to Richmond to adopt her, or she just went down to Richmond and it just happened.
I have no idea.
Okay,
and
all right.
In fact, most of us don't.
Okay.
But
but
she
Jean,
was her husband at that time was biracial.
So her husband was biracial. This is when she was with Mr. Hall, the biracial guy. Okay.
So my sister,
older than you by how many years?
10 years old.
Okay, 10 years
was
old.
adopted, and she was raised with my mother, Mr. Hall, for a while. And then after my mother left Mr. Hall and my father, then my father, who was very dark, and actually he was colorist against Jean. So Jean was both exalted in the family because she was light and had straight hair, and my father, being very dark, was very punitive against her because she was light. So the color complex is very complicated, complex, and both light-skinned and dark-skinned people are victims of it. Even as lighter-skinned people certainly have advantages, but they can also be victims of it.
So tell me this, Ma. Okay, so you have light-skinned people are victims of it, dark-skinned people are victims of it. Okay, I agree with that. I've always agreed with that. Now, your father, what type of punitive things would he do to Jean?
Well, he would just make remarks about her that made her feel diminished because, and a lot of it I knew even as a child, was because she was light. Now there could have been also some issues around her father being my mother's second husband and all of that. But I do know that my father did probably harbor some colorist attitudes because she was light. So my family was like many black families, all screwed up around colorism, having a lot of different attitudes that range from 0 to 10.
So now tell me this. Your mother and your father, how old were they when they had you?
Oh, my mother was 42 when I was born.
So did she think she could have children? Were you intentionally? Or
I don't think I was intentional. In fact, I know I wasn't. My mother was very surprised that she could have children. She thought she was too old.
Mm-hmm.
I do not know whether I was my mother's first child. I only know that I was her child.
So you think your mother has
I do not know that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that I know that I'm my mother's child, but you have to understand, parents don't tell their children everything.
Okay. So now tell me, she may have had a child and put up for adoption.
Whatever.
Okay, so tell me this. So your dad, he's dark skinned. What did he? Now he was he may have been kind of punitive towards Jean, your older light skinned sister, but what type of things did he do? Did he uplift you with your mother?
Yes. Now this was this is funny how things work. My father his whole family was very dark, and these were very black people who were very proud to be black. I mean, my father's side of the family was they were always talking about black history and black people who had done things in history. And he raised me on those stories. I often talk about how my bedtime stories were not Cinderella or Snow White, but they were about Hannibal, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass. So even though I had that influence from my father, in most families, the mother is the stronger cultural bearer because it's the mother who shapes the children. She has more contact with the children. She often disciplines the children more. She simply spends more time with the children. So even though I was getting positive things about black people from my father and about blackness, my mother's family was colorist, and so I got more of that I wasn't as close to my father's family as I was to my mother's family.
Okay.